Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to do a review of Nadia at tier 2, and more than that, I want to talk about all of the existing bio subscription characters and give you a new ranking for all of them and where I think their power levels lie. Because the last time I did this video about 4 or 5 months ago, you guys really enjoyed it. I got a kick out of it, and it gave a lot of you additional information and insight into probably the most expensive characters in the game besides, you know, Magneto and Emma Frost and Adam Warlock and stuff like that. So I thought it would be great to pair the two together. I'm still going to be giving you tips and build suggestions for this Wasp if you're considering getting her, but more than that, I think it's great to compare her to a lot of existing paywall characters, a lot of existing bio subscription characters, so that you can get a better feel for her overall value in the game. Because I think we're kind of past the stage of a character being so good for a specific game mode that you get them for that. There's so many characters in the game now, and unless that character is dominant the way that Jean Grey or Scarlet Witch is, or the way that Winter Soldier's uniform is, it really just comes down to preference and some utility. So for this, we're going to be including the two X-Gene characters, Magic and Colossus, on this list. We're also going to be including the bio subscription characters besides the ones that you can farm for with special mission shifters and the epic quest missions. So there's no Gwenpool on this list, there's no Satana, no Clea, no Inferno, no Vulture. But otherwise, we've got a full list of 15 characters, and I'll throw the list up now so we can just start discussing things and why certain characters are where they are. So I'm going to just run into some missions right now so you can see how she actually plays out, this being Nadia. But in the meantime, putting Luna Snow at number 1 is really a product of the game modes that we have existing right now that just benefit characters that can amplify their damage with Elemental more than something like Spider-Man 2099. Yes, for a long time, Spider-Man 2099 has been very useful for PvP, but he's always been kind of annoying to use in PvE content because of the fact that his skills just don't line up well enough with the proc like they should. And for that reason, I do think that, you know, he kind of gets edged out by Luna Snow for this specific thing, because I think more often than not with a bio subscription, you need that for, or you want those characters for PvE content rather than just an additional timeline team or something like that. It sounds a bit less impressive when you say it that way, but it's the truth of it. And when it comes down to Luna Snow versus Spider-Man 2099 for PvE content, Luna Snow does you know, outperform him. In terms of beyond that, Magic and Anti-Venom are just there because they're very high DPS characters. Nadia comes in at number 5 because, as you'll see, I think she is quite a high DPS character, probably somewhere around Agent Venom and Enchantress's level. I think the great thing about this character is the fact that she can be very flexibly built. And I've said this before about a few different characters, but because of the fact that her 4th skill, or her 4th star passive, allows her to have a damage proc at tier 2 when she uses her 3rd skill, and that's actually connected to her tier 2 passive, but basically she self-buffs in a big way. She gives herself basically a damage proc activation, the same way that Black Bolt does with his uniform, and because of that, you can build her either ultra offensively, or you can build her kind of half offensively, half defensively. Now, from what I've seen, most of the high-level players that have her, not a lot of people have her tier 2 right now, but those that do have opted for an obelisk that has invincibility and guard break immunity. So you will see, if you look on the rankings, a lot of CTPs of Patience, and that's very similar to the build that people give for the other Wasp, the kind of mom Wasp, Janet. So I think it makes sense for her, mainly because she doesn't have super armor, and she does have some gaps in her 4th skill, iframe, that one right there. And she can get guard broken at the end of her 5th skill. She can get guard broken throughout her 1st skill and her 3rd skill. So she does have some gaps that can be shored up. But additionally, I think that she is a good character, a good enough character to use in PvP situations. Whether you're manually playing with her in something like Timeline, I think she can be useful. But also, especially for Alliance Conquest, I would highlight, because of that bubble that she has around her, that gives the guard hit, that gives the debuff. She has a lot of utility in addition to some stuns and I think a silence effect on her 1st skill that gives her a lot of utility, and it also powers her up when she's paired up with other characters that can miniaturize or shrink their opponents, like Ant-Man, because whenever that triggers, whenever she's attacking a miniaturized enemy, all of the allies will get a damage buff, which is especially good for kind of rumbles and 3-on-3 situations. Now, keep in mind, I don't know how long this is going to take her, keep in mind that her 4th ability, or her 4-star passive, won't trigger against PvE content where the bosses cannot be debuffed. So, in World Boss and World Boss Ultimate, you can't shrink down the enemies, you can't debuff them with stuns and things like that. So her ability that gives her, I think it's a 5% buff at tier 1, and then it's a 10 or a 15% all attack buff at tier 2, and it applies to her allies, that will just never trigger when you're fighting a World Boss or a World Boss Ultimate. It will trigger in something like Shadowland, it will trigger in even Extreme Alliance Battle if you wanted to use her on No Restriction Day, and it'll definitely trigger on Alliance Conquest unless the enemy team uses debuff. That's the other problem. She is kind of slightly less effective against characters that have debuff removal. It doesn't take away her ability to trigger her damage proc, because that's just tied to her using her 3rd skill, but it does affect her tremendously at tier 1. So if you're using a tier 1 Nadia, you may notice that her damage proc from her 3rd skill basically never triggers in association with her 4-star passive, and that's because she can't miniaturize the enemies, so she can never get that buff. Moving along down the list, Killmonger and Ghost and Carnage, I kind of put them there because while you may argue that Carnage is a little bit more damage than Ghost, or something like that, Killmonger does have the added value of potentially giving you a CTP later on down the line if you were to build that uniform for the character. It is assuming additional value that might not be there, but it is part of his overall potential that he can give you. And then further on the list, further down, we've got Colossus, Quasar, Kid Kaiju, Ironheart, and Hyperion. The bottom of the list is pretty self-explanatory. Ironheart and Hyperion, basically, Hyperion doesn't have any survivability and his damage is tied to 1 or 2 skills. Ironheart has survivability, but her damage is useless and she's basically just there for the leadership. Kid Kaiju has just fallen so far behind the plethora of good speed characters that we've gotten lately for the past, year of updates, that he can't compete anymore. Additionally, because he's a summon heavy character, his base stats take a huge hit, so overall his damage is very weak, and as soon as his summon dies, his damage is anemic, which basically makes him unusable for high level competition. Anything above, I would say, a stage 10 for World Boss Ultimate, he's probably going to struggle tremendously because the HP of his summon will never scale up to be tanky enough to not die to the boss when being focused down by them. As far as Ghost goes, I didn't touch too much on Ghost when I was discussing them originally. I think I might have overestimated Ghost's value, but I do think that Ghost's damage is pretty low. I did give them originally, I gave her a damage proc, a 200% guard break damage proc, but even with extensive testing in Shadowland, I was not impressed with the damage. I saw someone on Reddit refer to Ghost as kind of like Mantis, and I think that's a really good way of describing it. I think Ghost is like a slightly less damaging version of Mantis. Mantis has additional buffs. There's an energy buff, but Mantis has additional crit damage buffs and ignore defense buffs that Ghost doesn't have. But because of the Intel Gathering, which adds that, I believe it's the fear effect on Intel Gathering, or maybe it's on Ghost Protocol. One of her skills has continuous fear damage to the enemy as long as they're inside this circle. I believe it's Intel Gathering, and that makes the character very good at crowd controlling like Mantis, and then it's just a slow fight of chipping them down. But again, investing that much for a character like Ghost when they're just going to be about as good as Mantis, except they're a villain and they have some additional utility as a leadership with a tier 2 passive that kind of buffs, not that fantastic. And of course, on the other hand, Mantis is free to play, so it, has a lot of differences there. And keep in mind, these values for Ghost are being put into consideration with a uniform. Mantis would probably pass Ghost with a uniform once she gets it, but for now she doesn't, so she can't. The rest of the list, I didn't really touch on every single character, but they have their ups and downs, they have their pros and cons. There is a bit of question for Valkyrie and Ghost specifically because you can obtain them for 2,500 crystals from the legendary battle, but taking all of that into consideration, I think the list is pretty indicative of Nadia's overall strength. While she may be in the top 5 for damage, she doesn't bring a lot of other utility to the team. Enchantress has the continuous charm effect, Agent Venom has the leadership, Magic has just really wild burst, and she is, you know, very good survivability for things like World Boss, and she can stay in the fight for a long time. Wasp kind of sits somewhere in the middle. So I would consider giving her guard break immunity. I would probably err towards defensive builds first, so, you know, max HP, invincibility, recovery rate. For an ISO 8 set, I think Overdrive is the preferred set offensively. Defensively, you can go for something like Binary Power, because she does have a damage or a debuff or a buff effect with the second skill, that gives her attack speed, so she doesn't need Power of Angry Hulk. Because of her gears as well, I wanted to quickly mention, she gets a double HP on her third, Biosynthetic Wings, which gives her a very large HP pool for a blast type. Right now, with no obelisk, as you saw, and of course no uniform, she's got almost 23,500 HP, which is gigantic for a blast types. Blast types are not generally known to have a ton of HP. If you were to make a quick comparison for base stats, at tier 2 her base HP is 14,900, so let's say 15,000 HP. That's comparable to another pretty tanky blast type, Sharon Rogers. She actually has more HP at tier 2 than Sharon Rogers does. So I think taking advantage of that defense, taking advantage of all that HP, in addition to the heal that she gives herself and the guard hit, really would make the character better. And you won't sacrifice the damage because you'll still have the damage proc from Unstoppable Wasp. You could also go for guaranteed dodge, but I think it's a better guarantee to just go for max HP and get that, you know, that 6% heal that triggers twice for 12%. On top of, you know, close to 30,000 HP when you build it all up. So that is the list for all of the Bio subscription characters. That's where I rank them all. That's how I see their value and their utility to your roster. Let me know what you think, what you agree with, what you disagree with. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me. Hit the bell if you don't want to miss any of my videos. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.